What is it going to take then to break through the partisanship in Washington, break the fever, so to speak? Here with us, of course, Walter Isaacson. This is Walter's idea. I absolutely love the notion of breaking the fever. And in Washington, Bill Galston is a senior fellow of governance studies at the Brookings Institution. Bill, let's start with you. You heard the president at the State of the Union, just like the rest of us did a couple of nights ago. Does a president who talks about using executive authority to do an end run around Congress, is he contributing to breaking the fever or just keeping the temperature rising?
I think that the use of executive orders is a sign and a symbol of the problem we have right now. The two political parties are at loggerheads. The temperature's down in Washington, not because people have agreed, but because they're exhausted and because the American people have recoiled in horror from the fighting of recent years. But in order to make real progress, we're going to have to do more than stop fighting. We're going to have a new governing process in this country, which No Labels, an organization I co-founded, believes has to be organized around a national strategic agenda, at the core of which is shared goals for the country. In the past, when the country has been able to agree on large goals, and the argument has turned to means, then we make progress. But if we don't have that kind of agreement, we're stuck, and right now we're stuck.
And that group, No Labels, is founded by former Governor John Huntsman, and it's an organization, Walter, you know very well. But you say that you think the fever pitch is breaking. Why?
Oh, I definitely think it's breaking. You've seen an appropriations bill start to move. You saw a budget deal start to move. You saw the fact that they're not going to stop the debt ceiling and shut down the government on that. Ted Cruz can say whatever he wants, but he's not the leader of the Republican Party in the Senate, nor are the Republicans the leaders of the Senate. Mitch McConnell, the senator from Kentucky, is the leader of the Republican Party, and he's taking a much more problem-solving oriented approach. And I think you've already seen in the past month a huge turnaround in the atmosphere of Washington. I will say that
what happened, though? What was the breaking point? What happened?
I think what happened was a fever breaks when you do something like shut down the government partially for 16 days.
Thanks to Ted Cruz, by the way.
Well, many others did it. I mean, he couldn't have done it alone. I think you needed something like that to say, well, actually, this is not a good strategy. I thought President Obama was very good in the State of the Union saying, hey, that's not why we were sent to Washington.
Bill, would you agree with what Walter is saying? When you have people like Ted Cruz saying that they're going to keep fighting, if he speaks for some people other than just himself, we have to presume that he speaks for sort of the Tea Party wing of the Republicans. Can the fever really break if you have folks who are, that hot and bothered about the way politics is being done in D.C.?
Look, I think Cruz was much more influential 6 months ago than he is today, because a lot of Republicans and most of the Republican leadership saw that the Cruz-style strategy,
the Cruz missile, if you will,
yeah, absolutely, but it missed its target. Right, and led the Republican Party to the greatest period of unpopularity in my lifetime. But there's a big difference between stopping the fight and actually starting the process of solving the problems. Yeah. And that's the distinction I want to insist on. If you look at the budget agreement, everybody agrees it was the most minimal agreement possible because each party took the most controversial items off the table. And what you were left with was the status quo minus the fight. But the status quo minus the fight is not solving the problem.
Bill, Betty was asking you about No Labels and mentioned that John Huntsman's a co-chair. I know Senator Joe Manchin, a Democrat, is the other co-chair, and you've been working on it. Tell us about a national strategic plan that you think can help get us out of this.
Well, just a word about No Labels. We started with a massive mobilization of citizens nationwide, now in the hundreds of thousands. We have a group of problem solvers in the Congress, numbering more than 80, pretty evenly split between Democrats and Republicans. They get together at least once a month to talk through serious issues. They've already agreed on some legislation. And what we're planning to do now is identify through a process of broad consultation a handful of high-priority goals that bring the country together, and then we're going to organize a national discussion around the means to those goals, and we're going to get that done within a year.
Listening to Bill say that, I mean, that sounds very reasoned and reasonable, but the fact of the matter is, Bill, is that No Labels was ignored for a long time. Perhaps this might now finally be your moment in the sun.
Well, we started from nowhere 3 years ago. Now we have more than 80 members of Congress identifying with our, not only with the organization, but with the process of developing a national strategic agenda that will produce these goals and the means to them. That's enormous progress in 3 years from a standing start. And if we do as well in the next 3 years as we did in the first 3 years, we're going to be a force to be reckoned with, I promise you.
Walter, what Bill says sounds so appealing, right? It's reasonable, it's rational, it's sensible. I have a problem with it, though. At the moment, it doesn't sound very American. And I say that as a Canadian, right? What Bill is talking about is the equivalent of my national motto, right? Peace, order, and good government, as opposed to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which is kind of what I hear from both sides of the political spectrum. Each faction fighting for what it believes is best, not gravitating towards the center, where there isn't anything for people to latch on to.
Let me push back on you, because I disagree. I think right now you're seeing an American spirit that says, you know what, all of this fighting over the past year, 2 years, 3 years, we had got that out of the system. There are a couple we could probably do. I think immigration reform, a lot of Democrats and Republicans like to get that done. You could probably do some entitlement reform. You could do a serious budget. I think America always has a wonderful, not just a pendulum, it's like a gyroscope. You think it's going to tilt over, it rights itself.
I'm not suggesting for a moment that it's going to tilt over.
But the American democracy right now, I think, is righting itself and saying, let's have a few more practical things and quit playing around in Washington and being idiots and getting in the way of what is. And I think what's important here is you're starting to see an economic rebound, and people are saying to Washington, for heaven's sake, get out of the way of this rebound.
All right, Walter, you stay with us through the hour. Bill Galston of the Brookings Institute in Washington, thank you so much for